Hello, today let us start with object-oriented programming in Python. So what is object-oriented programming? Object-oriented programming is a method of programming by using the ideas of objects and classes to represent the data and methods. So it's also an approach used for creating neat and reusable code instead of redundant one. So object-oriented programming is a method of programming which uses basically two parts, objects and classes to represent data and methods. Data are also known as attributes. So, and it is also an approach of creating a neat and reusable code instead of writing a redundant code. So, object oriented programming is also known as OOPS concept. So, it has six main concepts. So, basically, classes and objects are the stepping stones, and polymorphism, encapsulation, inheritance, and abstractions are the other four important concepts which are the parts of object oriented programming. Now let us start with classes and objects, and we can proceed with other concepts in the upcoming slides. Now let us discuss about Python classes. A Python class is a group of attributes and methods. So a Python class is also a blueprint for creating an object. So a class will be a collection of attributes and methods. Attributes can be data or variables. So syntax is class name, def underscore underscore init underscore underscore self variable name is equal to value, def method underscore name self body of method. So this is the simple syntax of class. So we need to define a class name, and a def init is a constructor, and we need to define a self variable which is first variable. So self dot variable name is equal to value. So the variable name can be any of the thing, and the value will be the input or the data which you want to give to the variable which will be associated with self. Now, we need to define a method, def method underscore name self. So we can define a particular function here. So method name can be any of the type, and it should be consider the self as a first parameter, and you can define the method. So for your reference, I have written one example as well. So class is equal to class A def underscore underscore init self. So this is a constructor. Here self dot name is equal to Ravi I have written. So this is my input I have given to the constructor. Then I have defined a function which is known as disp, and it has two arguments. The self is an first argument, and it will be considered as first parameter internally, and we don't want to explicitly add an argument in the formal argument in the actual arguments. So we are passing an actual argument age. So student underscore age is equal to age. Then we can pass stu name is equal to self dot name, and age is equal to age or stu underscore age. So what are attributes? So since Python class are a collection of attributes and methods, so what are attributes? So attributes are represented by variables that contains data. So these are represented by variables that contains data. Method performs an action or task. So method is nothing but a function which is used to perform a specific task. It is similar to function. So before moving to Python objects, let us create this syntax with an example in the code editor, and later I will discuss Python object and how we can call this object, how we can create this object and call the class. That thing we can discuss. First, let us create this Python class in our code editor. Class.view. So here I will define a class student. So here I will define a constructor def underscore init. So underscore init. So self will be the first parameter by default, and I will pass self dot name is equal to Rama, something like this. I will just define. Now let us define a method called dis, and self will be the first parameter. Self dot. So for this, let me define a parameter called age. Age is equal to age. I will call this while creating an object. While creating an object, I will call this function, and I will pass an actual argument. Now I will try to print name of the student is, and I will pass self dot name. Name of the student is, and his age is self dot age. So this is the completion of class. So I'll try to brief out what exactly I have written. I have defined a class called student. In this, I have defined a constructor f underscore underscore init, which is self as the first parameter, and under that I've defined a variable self dot name is equal to Rama. So for the name, I have given as Rama. Now I've defined one more method, def dis self comma age, where age is my formal argument. I will be passing this formal argument with the help of, I will passing the data for this formal argument using an actual argument. So self dot age is equal to age. Print f string. So f string is used to print the internal data in the normal string itself. So I'm using f string. Then name of the student is, so I will open parenthesis, sorry, flower brackets, and I will write self dot name, and his age is, I will open again the flower brackets, and I will write is age. So whichever the variables I have defined with the help of self, I will be defining that. So this is how exactly the class should be defined. So that's the declaration of classes here. So after defining the classes, you need to understand the statements. It's a collection of attributes and methods. So here, these are my attributes. So these are my attributes, and this will be our method. So these are the methods. So this is our constructor. I will be defining this in later. So this is my method. So it's a collection of variables or attributes and method. That's what class defines. Now let us move to Python object. So object is an instantiation of a class or a class instance. So when a class is created, a memory is not allocated, but classes only initiate when an object is created for it, and memory is allocated thereafter. So the classes, when you create the classes won't be allocate its own memory unless or until you create an object for a class. The memory won't be allocated for a class, because so the object is considered as instantiation of a class. It's an instantiate process for a class. So that's what the definition of Python object. So each time you create an object of a class, a copy of each variable defined in the class is created. So whenever you create an object for a class, each set of copies will be created, so that for you don't have to define only one object to one class. You could able to create multiple objects for a single class. So at that point of time, a multiple set of variables will be defined. So that's what it defines. So in the following example itself, I will define how the declaration should be. Object declaration I will be explaining in the following example. Here I will try to declare the object. Now object 1 is equal to student. I will call the class. Now with the help of object 1, I need to call its function. So since it has a formal argument age, I need to pass an actual argument. Let me define its age as 24. Then I will try to run this file. If you look into the output, so I got a print statement where the name of the student is Rama, and his age is 24. Here the attributes data has been read in the following in the method, and even the argument which I am passing from the actual argument has taken in the reference of this function, and even that has been processed, and it returns in the print statement, and its age is 24. So this is how the object declaration happens. So I will try to explain the third statement here, which each time you create an object of a class of copy of each variable defined in the class is created. So now I have created object 1. So if I want to create object 2, again I could able to call the class, then I could able to call its function. Now if I pass this, again there will be two set of variables will be created. Hence the first set of variable will display name of the student is Rama and his age is 24, then name of the student is Rama and his age is 25. So in this way you could able to perform instantiation method for a class with the help of object. By creating multiple objects, you could able to create multiple class variables. That's what the complete the descriptions of classes and object. Now let us move into constructor. So as I said, we have a constructor here. So let us understand the content first, then we get able to get back here. So constructor underscore init double bracket is a special method called a constructor for initializing the instance variable of a class. So it's an initialization of instance variable of a class. So whenever you create an object, so it will be the first method or an first special method which will be called itself or initialize the variables of a class. So when you create an object for the class, this constructor will be automatically called, and it initialize the class variables. So that's what the operation it will do whenever you create an object for the class. So the object will be the instantiation of the class. When you instantiate the class, the constructor will be automatically called, and it will create the memory space, or it will initialize the class variables. So once you initialize, the memory allocation will be happen for class variables. And a constructor is called only at the time of creating an instance. So creating an instance means creating an object. So as I said before, it's a class instance. So since object is a class instance, the constructor is only called once at the time of creating an instance. When you create an object, then only the constructor will be called. It takes self as a default first parameter and also takes few more argument as an input. So here the constructor can take self as a first parameter by default. So, and you may even pass few more arguments into the constructor. Now in this example, we have did the process of constructor without arguments. Here we have not at all defining any of the arguments in this function, but we could able to pass arguments to the constructor also. So now you can see here a class in the example class A def in itself self dot name Ravi, and self diff self is student name, self name age is age. So in this way you could able to define, but there is so that's what the example here it explains here. So here we have an self as a first parameter and doesn't have any of the arguments. So this is constructor without arguments. Now let us define, and we have defined. So here when you call the constructor, the self dot name is Rama we have given by default. So if you want to pass any of the additional arguments, you could make use of constructor with arguments. Now let us run the constructor with arguments. Now let me define a class. So class student. So here I will define a constructor init self dot name. I will just define a name here. So self dot name is equal to name. So I'm giving the formal argument as a name, and with the help of self variable, I'm defining its name, right? So now I will define one more function, def disp or def show self age. So for your convenience, I'm just giving the example which will be commonly used. Like for your understanding sake, I'm giving this type of examples because it will be easy for understanding purpose. Now self dot age is equal to age. Now if you want to print f string name of the student is self dot name and his path her age is self dot age. So here you could able to understand the concept here. Now this is the class. So here we have a constructor, we have a method. These are my class variables. So once after defining the constructor, it has self as a first parameter. So self is a first parameter, but in the previous case it doesn't have any of the argument. But here I'm passing an formal argument as name. So now the user can give actual argument and pass a value to this formal argument, and you could able to make use of that to print certain data. After defining a formal argument with the help of self variable self.name is equal to name, I could able to declare the class variable. Later, with the help of class method, I could able to get one more data age. So here my class method is show, and I have taken the formal argument as age. Since self is an first parameter in the class, we don't want to bother about it. So we are using age as a formal argument, and I'm declaring this with the self parameter self.age is equal to age. Now I'm printing the classes variables. So first I print with the help of a string, I print name of the student is self.name and his or her age is self.age. So after declaring this variable, now I will declare an object. Now object 1 is equal to student. So in order to pass a actual argument to the constructor, you need to define the name here itself. So I'm passing Arjun as my first argument, which will be given to the constructor, that is name. Then I will call the object node1 dot show function. So here I will pass his age as 27. Now if I print this, you could able to see name of the student is Arjun and his or her age is 27. And if, as I said, objects can be used to create multiple copies of the variable. So you could able to create object 2 is equal to student Raksha, then object 2 dot show, let her age be 24. If I try to create this, so name of the student is Raksha and his or her age is 24. Now I think I have covered each and every concept. So I have defined the class. We defined the class by creating a constructor and a class variable, and I have created a method, and I have created one more class variable, and finally I accessed this class variables in the class method. So finally I declared an object, and I have called this method, class method. So and we after declaring, I got an output as so and so, like name of the student is Arjun and his or her is 27. And we have did one more operation where you could able to perform the multiple variable copies of a single class by creating multiple objects. This is the second one. And then the third one, so we have created two set of constructors, where constructor with without arguments, constructor with arguments. In the previous example, we have defined a default value for the constructor, and we will be making use of that class variable in our class method. But by using constructor with arguments, we just pass the data from the actual arguments to the formal argument of constructor. Then we just access that data in the class method and perform the print operation to print the certain data. This how exactly the class, object, and instance and constructor works. So that's the completion of constructor. Now let us move to self variable. So now you have seen the self as the first parameter in the class. So what is self? So self is the variable which will be used in an industrial so self is a variable which will be used as a first parameter for a class. So it will be default variable. So instead of self, so you could able to make use of any other variables. But to maintain some industrial standards, we should make use only self as a first parameter, which will be well common, and it will be easily understand for our other programs when you are working in a project. So now let us look into self variable. So self is a default variable that contains the memory address of the current object. So this variable will contains the memory address of this object. So whenever you call an object for the class, so the self variable will contains the memory address of this class. Memory address of this object. So when you declare an object to the class, so the object will have some memory address, and this memory address will be stored into this self variable. This variable is used to refer all the instance variables and methods. So this variable is used to access all the instance variable and methods. So it is used to access all the methods and variables. So that's so here you could able to see the object one dot show. Here I'm using with the help of self. I'm able to access the show method of this class. So that's the definition. Now self is the first argument to any object method, because the first argument is always the object reference. So self will be added as default parameter because it will be acting as a memory address for each and individual object. So hence it will be the default one. You don't want to add explicitly any other variable. So anyhow, if you pass only single argument, also the single argument for a class, it is considered as argument one itself, because even though it has two formal arguments, self and name, self is considered as internal or default argument for a class. Hence there won't be any error pop up. As I said, def underscore init self and def disp self. So whenever you define any constructor method or any method, so self will be the first parameter and it will be the object reference. So it will contains the memory address of each individual object. Then only you could able to create the multiple copies of this class. So that's the completion of class, object, constructor, and self variable. In the upcoming session, we will be discussing the other 4 concepts of object-oriented programming. Thank you.